Imagine living in a world where you could be punished just for expressing your thoughts. Sounds unreal, right? But even today, around the world, and sometimes even online, people face consequences for simply speaking their minds. So what does free speech truly mean?
There are multiple bills in progress that force teachers to teach a certain kind of history and avoid divisive topics. Teachers are already suffering punishment for exercising their right to free speech in the classroom. Though the First Amendment is partially waived for public employees like educators, they are still protected in various ways to be able to speak on issues of public interest. In this documentary, we will see how much the First Amendment is being upheld and where it is being entirely disregarded by the Ohio government.
The school district shall not solicit or require an employee to affirmatively ascribe to or opine about specific beliefs, affiliations, ideals, or principles concerning political movements or ideology. The school district shall not solicit or require a student to firmly ascribe to specific beliefs, affiliations, ideals, or principles concerning political movements or ideology. The school district shall not use statements of commitment to specific beliefs, affiliations, ideals, or principles concerning political movements or ideology as part of the evaluation criteria for employees or applicants for employment, or employees that are seeking career progression or benefits. The school district shall not use statements of commitment to specific beliefs, affiliations, ideals, or principles concerning political movements or ideology as part of the academic evaluation of students. An educator's freedom. An educator's ability to research or write publications about specific beliefs, affiliations, ideals, or principles concerning political movements, ideology, or social action.
A bill is currently working its way through the government called HB 327. This bill will prohibit educators from discussing topics termed divisive, a word defined in the text of the bill to include content that argues that the United States is fundamentally racist or sexist, and meritocracy or traits such as hard work ethic are racist or sexist, or were created by a particular group of people. This bill clearly states that no school district shall teach, instruct, or train any divisive concepts, nor shall any school district require a student to advocate for or against a specific topic or point of view to receive credit for any coursework. This text clearly advocates for allowing bigotry and denial of history, as well as prohibiting room for nuanced discussion of sociology, government, and other topics. This clearly violates the First Amendment. Another incoming bill, proving itself to be reactionary just in its title, is the Charlie Kirk American Heritage Act, or HB 486. This bill is an attempt to require teachers to instruct students using Christian doctrine, writing an excessively inaccurate history of Christianity in America, with no mention of other religions. By forcing teachers to specifically teach Christian history, this bill is in clear violation of multiple terms in the First Amendment, including freedom of religion and freedom of speech. Beyond these potential bills passing and worsening the situation, Ohio educators are already suffering from restrictions on their free speech in schools. One teacher, Karen Cahal, was suspended from her longtime third grade teaching position without pay when she was reported by a parent for having LGBTQ+ books in her classroom. She attempted to sue the state in retaliation, but had her case thrown out.
We interviewed various Ohio educators to gather their opinions on free speech policy. These teachers are experiencing the ramifications of bills like HB 486 in real time.
Can you describe your current role and how long you've worked in education?
Fifth year of teaching. I've taught my entire career in the same school district. It's a very small district, about 20 miles east of Cincinnati, right on the Ohio River. I love this community. I love the families and the kids. Let's see. Well, I grew up in Cincinnati in a small town that is very much like New Richmond is now. I grew up in Loveland, which is totally kind of exploded population-wise since then. But it just felt when I went for my interview when I was 23 years old that it just felt like going home.
Mhm.
So, I've always loved teaching. I had 3 or 4 different majors in college before I finally settled on teaching, but it just seemed like every kind of degree that I considered, I somehow could swing it around to, I thought I'd be a vet. And I thought, oh, when I'm a veterinarian, then I can have classes in the back where I can teach kids how to take care of their pets. Or when I thought maybe I'll be a psychologist, I thought, oh, then I'll have classes where I can, teach the kids how to have good mental health. And finally, my dad said, Karen, it sounds like what you really want to do is teach.
Yeah.
I'm currently a career teacher at the high school, and this is my 25th year, but it's only my second year doing the career tech classes. So I taught everything from American history to world history to psychology to current events. I pretty much anything that you could teach in social studies, I taught.
Yes, I actually have been a teacher for 22 years. I taught second grade all 22 years and enjoyed it. I loved it. I loved the kids. I loved the opportunities I had with them.
I've worked in education for 19 years, and I currently serve as an assistant superintendent in a school district located in Cuyahoga County.
My name is Mason Forwan. I am a 7th grade history teacher. This is my first full-time year in education. I have been working in and out of school districts as a substitute teacher, both as a building sub, long-term sub, day-to-day, for the last few years right out of college. But this is my first year full-time in the classroom. I currently work for Cuyahoga Valley Christian Academy in Cuyahoga Falls.
So I'm Riley Keene. I currently a AP Government and American History teacher here at Stowe Monroe Falls High School. I've done 10 plus years in education total.
After COVID, I came back. I had taken some time off because I had an elderly relative that was living with us. We had some fears about her being exposed to COVID, so I took some time off. And when I came back, there was a controversial, the district was calling it a controversy about rainbows. The middle school had been given a directive from the administration that every single rainbow had to be taken down, whether it was, I wasn't aware that there were rainbow flags, but there was an in-service where teachers were told that, LGBTQ students might not feel comfortable approaching every teacher, and it might be helpful if they knew which teachers were open to conversations. And so they were given little rainbow stickers to put on their laptop or their door frame or something so that students would know who they could talk to if they needed to, because bullying has been an issue in our district, particularly with LGBTQ students. Somehow there came to be a turmoil over that, and the board reacted by telling teachers that not only could they not wear those pins or put those stickers on their desks, but any other rainbow in their classroom, whether it was a poster or an art project, had to be removed. And that made kind of a big splash in the news. And I was just coming back from COVID at that time, and I was just flabbergasted that was the reaction. So I did a little bit of research on the needs of LGBTQ students, and I found that they do need to be supported in the classroom, and students that have just one adult that's willing to support them have up to a 40% less risk of self-harm. And so I looked around, and I attended an in-service online through GLSEN, which provided high quality, award-winning children's literature at different grade levels. And I thought, well, I'll get those books, and they'll be available for kids who need them. Because of this case, when the first thing that happened when the teachers were given the rainbow pins, and then they told they had to get rid of all the rainbows, teachers weren't allowed to show any sign at all of their support of LGBTQ families in the district. But because of this lawsuit, I was given permission to wear this pin, and I do wear it every day. And it's not just for LGBTQ families and students who have family members. It's for all people to see that, yeah, here's a person who's not afraid to stand up and say that LGBTQ people are worthy of the same support, love, and respect as everybody else. I am starting a nonprofit called the Rainbow Classroom Legal Fund. And The mission will be to protect and promote LGBTQ students, educators, and families who experience discrimination in public schools, um, for either who they are or for even just trying to support people in the LGBTQ community. I really want it to be a resource for people, both financially and legally and educationally, so that people can stop being so defensive all the time and advocating for themselves and advocating for their LGBTQ families and their LGBTQ students and staff. I mean, every school has LGBTQ staff, and how must that feel as a staff member to realize that your district finds you so much of an issue that they can't even have books in the student's library that describe a kid who has two moms or two dads? The good news is when I'm in my classroom and I'm teaching, that really is where I love to be. I mean, I love to teach. I love the kids. I love everything that has to do with teaching that involves being in the classroom and teaching. But this last year's been kind of rough. I mean, there have been issues, not with the, I mean, I won't go into detail about them, but there have been some hurtful situations that have happened. And since I do take what I do so seriously and I love it so much, it's kind of been hard to let those things kind of bounce off my back. Respecting, loving, and supporting students, that is what my job is.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a roadblock has been put in front of me as far as being able to actualize my mission. But yeah, I don't see those things as two separate things. And it's unfortunate that it has become a point of either or, because it's not. I mean, I can't teach if I can't be supportive of all the students in my classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So even though the books were banned, I mean, I have found other ways to let students and families know, this being one of them, that, you know, I'm here for all of them.
How would you describe the culture of free discussion in your district?
In the absence of me being in the classroom interacting with students, especially the older the students get, where they are in a place where they're interested and thinking more cognitively, metacognitively, I believe those conversations are present within classroom settings. But certainly, if there's any concern about a conversation, or if it's rising to the level that the teacher believes they might need to direct the student because it's not adding value or benefit to the classroom content, that might be a time where the teacher is going to redirect the conversation. But I'm basing that not on examples and observations. It's just, I'm aware that our classroom teachers, when it's appropriate, could set up open conversations, but there's always going to be guardrails for students too.
Much more. I think the way that this is being handled has created a chilling effect. Teachers are afraid to say anything that might get them, you know, someone might disagree with. They're a fear of being retaliated against. I think, unfortunately, that does have an effect on teacher-student relationships. If they don't feel like they can be supportive of all the students in their classroom, then that puts a wall between students and their teachers. I think the word controversial is vague. I mean, in my lawsuit, Mark flat out said anything two people disagree on can be considered controversial. And how many people have to be on each side of that issue before it's controversial? The vast majority of people who have approached me in the district, in my school, and around the country have been in support of this. The amount of negative interactions I've had have been relatively few when compared with the positive. So, I mean, is it controversial because the people in charge think it's controversial? And why do they get to make that decision when the community may or may not agree with them? So I think just the term controversial itself is vague. And I think that there's some, I will say, I think that when that term controversial issue is used, we all know what they mean. They mean LGBTQ issues and some of the other kind of culture war issues that people are upset about right now. And so they get to call out the people they disagree with without actually having to say it.
I would say, despite it being a religious school, there's sometimes the stereotype that there would not be free discussion. I've noticed there actually is quite a bit. I can speak really much only for my school, but there's a tremendous amount of open discussion. It's encouraged that students explore multiple different perspectives and different beliefs, though the school does have a set of beliefs that students and parents are required to sign off on, saying, yes, we adhere to these beliefs and these religious practices. There's a strong encouragement for students to seek and explore multiple perspectives. Other speakers are brought in who are blatant atheists who promote multiple different belief systems, whether it's political or religious. So I would say it's actually a pretty strong sense of diversity of thought at my school, which I'm very grateful for.
I think it's more free in my classes than I've heard in some of the other government classes, and I think that's because I'm a little bit less afraid to ask kind of kids what they think or to have a discussion. Also, my curriculum kind of lends itself to it. Like, they have to kind of say what they think. We dive into more controversial materials than in other classes.
How familiar are you with the First Amendment rights for public school teachers?
I honestly, I probably should be a little bit more. But I think it's also it's a gray area that like has been sort of changing around us. I think I would have been more comfortable answering that question 5 years ago than today. I know of like situations where people have lost their jobs for views, but I don't know if that's necessarily legal. Like, I don't know how the Supreme Court feels about it. I know that there's some teachers who are worried that their private social media posts and stuff like that will come back to to haunt them. I know that if I'm connecting my content that I get delivered to my students to curriculum, to a pre-approved curriculum that we have, to something that's real world and impactful, I'm licensed to get away with a lot of stuff.
You think educators have a responsibility to educate our youth and model free speech and civil discourse between each other?
I think no, but I think educators have a responsibility to display effective communication skills that are respectful, responsible, and hold value to anyone they're having a conversation with.
Do you think teachers should be allowed to discuss current or social political issues if they relate to the curriculum? Why or why not?
I do, but I think teachers or educators in that position should not disclose what their beliefs are. Their role is to facilitate conversations, not to promote one side versus the other.
In 7th grade, I don't get that many controversial or political discussions, quite honestly. But I do a lot of work with our high schoolers as well. It's something as simple as even covering a class for another teacher, covering a government class, a philosophy class, or even just lunches, study halls. These are opportunities to have conversations with students. I don't shy away from these discussions with students. If it's a controversial topic or politics in general can sometimes get heated, I usually am very transparent with them about here are my leanings. Here's what I believe. Where it's like, just so you know, going into this conversation, here's where I'm at on the political spectrum. But that's where I stop most of my speaking on the topic. I try to encourage the students to find their own voice, and I think it's more important that they figure out what they believe about the topic or the category and their political leanings. Much more important than what I have already figured out.
I try to stick as much as possible to the standards, because as long as you're teaching the standards, then I feel like you're pretty much covered. You're going to be okay. But as soon as you start to deviate a little bit, that's where you can get yourself into some situations.
So if you couldn't get into those situations, would you like to teach something outside of those state standards?
Yeah, I think that, especially during the election time, there's a lot of interesting things that you could discuss. You talk about the issues, you could dive deeper into the reason why this candidate's winning or this candidate's losing. But again, you don't want it to be being perceived as, supporting one candidate or over another, or that you're a liberal or a conservative.
Do you think teachers should be allowed to discuss current social or political issues if they relate to the curriculum?
Absolutely, 100%. They need to be. I think we all really love it when there's current events that you could tie it to, because the student comes in and goes and wants a million questions about it. If you have the curriculum, if you have the curriculum to back you up on it, if it's directly related, then yes, it has to be taught. You know, the Dobbs decision, obviously the Roe reversal, but like the Dobbs decision is like, you know, this, I talk about it all the time when we talk about federalism and the role of the federal government. Is it the federal government's responsibility? That's a controversial issue that many students are like, I don't understand how, like, you know, government's coming after my rights if they're a woman or identify as a woman. You know, they're like, this decision affects me, and you know, it's controversial, and you know, I can be triggered by it. But it's like, we have to teach. You have to teach the controversy in order to get anywhere. Like, otherwise, if we just say like, okay, everybody agree with each other and whatever, and then you get out there and that's just not how it works. Kids enter your class with this sort of knowledge. Do they leave it with this? Like, there has to be continuity. The kids have to see a vision for it.
Do you think the current political climate has affected teachers' ability to express themselves?
Not really. I would say sort of more on the state and local kind of thing. I think that there's been a lot more scrutiny on teachers at the local level and across districts. And yeah, I think me personally, I've wondered, man, if a student goes home and they don't provide the full context of what happened in a day, and they just were like, we talked about abortion, right? Like, you know, and it's like, what the hell are you talking? You know, like, you know. So there's always part of me that always has that like little pit in my stomach. But like, again, if I can show what I'm doing, I think I'm more like scared of like it turning into almost like a tribunal kind of thing. I have no evidence to base this on either, but I'm just saying that like, hey, justify what you said here, right? As opposed to like, I'm doing this in good faith. You hired me to do a job in good faith. There's no benefit to me to betray that trust of yours and, you know, just be like, we're all gonna make kids liberal, or we're all gonna make kids MAGA, right? Like, so I fear that like I would be asked to constantly justify topics, things said, discussed in class. But I fear that more at the local level than I do at the federal level.
Well, in history, you know, you're always hesitant to talk about some stuff that's going on currently, you know, especially with the elections. So, you know, you want to discuss it, but you don't get too far into the issues because you know that, you know, it could come back and, you know, bite you if it's, you know, perceived one way as liberal, conservative, whatever. I think it was less back then, but I was even careful early on because I was a new teacher. Like I didn't know, you know, on how far I could take things, especially coming from, you know, a Catholic school upbringing myself. You know, I was very careful on how I presented things or what I could say. You know, I didn't want to push an agenda because, you know, obviously separation of church and state, and you know, you're just careful on how you present material to the students. You don't want to be, again, accused of pushing your beliefs or your values on someone.
Throughout your career, have you ever gotten any type of training or spoken to how to talk in your classroom or navigate certain topics?
Not really. When I think about it, you really don't have any, you know, professional development or anything when it comes to what you can and can't say in a classroom. You get warned maybe like at a staff meeting or through an email or through a text, but you don't really have professional development when it comes to certain topics, how to teach this or that. You know, they kind of just, you know, leave you hanging at times.
Yeah.
All right, lastly, what advice would you give to new teachers navigating free speech boundaries?
Nail down your curriculum. Have a clear-cut direction for what you're doing. I've gotten in trouble about off-the-cuff remarks and stuff like that, but they were usually because I was like, you know, saying dirty words. You know what I mean? Like, hey, just don't do that. Like, think before you speak, right? Yeah. And what I mean to say by that is that don't overthink. Like, if it connects to your curriculum, if it's relevant, is it germane to what you're doing in the classroom, then talk about it. But, you know, be ready to rein it in, right? Be ready to break it up, shut it down once it gets out of your control. If you feel like you can't control it anymore, then you probably shouldn't bring it up. So dip your toe in if you're a young teacher. Then maybe you can go a whole foot. Then you're knee deep, and then you're swimming by the end of it, right? Just make sure you're confident. Make sure that you're backed up by curriculum. Make sure that you're, because if you're doing that and you're presenting it in a good faith, good natured way, then you should be confident on what you do. Yeah. But again, I you know, it's a struggle. Do you bring this up? Do you not? And even do you run with what the class says? So even if it's brought up in your class, don't be like, well, I'm not the one who brought it up. Like, if you can't connect it to what you're doing, then I would say stay away from it. But if you're justified and you feel like you're morally justified by curriculum, by the due diligence of kids, have at it. Have at it. I think you'll find that you're doing the right thing.
What advice would you give to new teachers navigating free speech boundaries in today's climate?
Just be careful. Be careful. Censor yourself before you say it. Think before you talk. Like, don't just wing it. You want to be careful because things could be interpreted. Now, even with kids with cell phones and things like that, they can tape it, and next thing you're on the news and then in the newspapers. So just be careful what you say when it's a touchy subject.
Being a prior history teacher, what would you suggest to teachers, other either English or history teachers, because that can be sometimes a touchy, sensitive subject? What advice would you give them regarding curriculum? Would you tell them to just stick to standards, or would you tell
I
them
do.
to?
I do. I find myself that, like, even with the American history class and it's a state test, I just stuck to the standards 95% of the time. I knew that as long as I stuck to those, I was going to be okay. When I started to deviate a little bit and try to get creative and do things outside the box, that's when, you feel less protected because of different interpretations.
Uh, yeah, I think so. I think it has definitely made the teaching situation harder, but that's something that you get used to as the years go by in teaching. I mean, think about it. You're there for math and science and reading. When you get to the social studies and the history, it gets a little touchy.
Mhm.
Um, so I think teachers being teachers and being, let's say if they're, been around for a while, being as professional as they are, they can find their way around it.
Mhm. What advice would you give to new teachers navigating free speech boundaries?
I can be honest with you. I wouldn't give any advice because my own kids, I told them they were not allowed to go into the education field. My advice would be like, do not go into the education field.
And you
But
gave them that. Why? Can you explain why you gave them that advice?
well, just because of what's going on, just this interview in itself. I mean, are you can see the system going down.
Mhm.
You can see where, like I said, what level we're at in regards to other countries, in comparison to other countries. Um, Things are not going in the right direction. I would never let my children do it. I already told them. I says, your grandfather, your father, your mother, your uncle, all involved in teaching. You're not allowed to go into teaching because of what's going on in the school environment. And
I think first you have to know what your core beliefs are. And I would say, based on the conversations that I've had with teachers from all over the country at this point, there are some school districts that are much more open to allowing teachers to be supportive than others. And although the schools that have a more conservative mindset need teachers that are willing to speak out and advocate just as much as other schools, I think you have to kind of match your level of ability to deal with discomfort and controversy and conflict with the situation where you find your job. I mean, I love teaching. I love it. I mean, it is what I was born to do. And when I'm in the classroom teaching, that is where I'm supposed to be, and it's my happy place. And every year at the beginning of the year, I get excited about all the new kids and all the new content. And I mean, I love it. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't have made it this long. And if I didn't love the kids, I would not have stepped out and kind of put my neck on the chopping block with this whole lawsuit. I just feel like teacher, somebody's got to stand up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm so excited about this nonprofit. I want to help people to to be able to do that and feel like they have some support and standing up.
Teachers play a vital role in shaping the minds of future generations, yet their ability to speak freely is often challenged by politics or policy. Freedom of speech is not just a constitutional right, it's the foundation of honest education. By protecting teachers' voices, we protect our students' ability to think critically, ask questions, and learn without fear.
Teachers have to feel free to be able to support their students.